Seconds, 3 seconds. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Christian Chito. I'm the program advisor for Conducive Space for Peace and founder of Peacemaker 360, a communication and profit that highlights stories of young peace builders around the world. Today, we are joined by two amazing guests, Manal and Annalisa, who will be taking us in a very exciting conversation, talking on the one hand about Unconventional, which is a very interesting initiative that they both are part of that empowers young women and young women peace builders around the world to develop their careers and also to find a network of support that can help them to excel. And they'll be also talking to us about Task Force on Psychosocial Support for local peace builders. These two exciting initiatives, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about them. And if you are ready to join us in the conversation, please do not hesitate to do so in the comment section. Ask them any question that you feel, and please let's join into this very exciting conversation. So, Annalisa and Manal, how are you guys doing today?
Yeah, doing great. We're excited. This is my first time doing this Facebook Live thing, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, doing great. Thanks so much, Christian, for having us, and great to be with you all on Peacemaker 360 today. Also my first Facebook Live event.
Fantastic. Maybe just to get us started and to let our audience know who you are, I was wondering if you guys can share a little bit more about who you are, of course, and where you're calling us from and how you're coping with this crazy time. And most importantly, tell us about how you got involved into the peace building field. Let's maybe start with Annalisa, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Christian. So my name is Annalisa Jackson. I currently work for the Mary Hoke Center for Reconciliation, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. But I'm currently based in New York City. And how I've been coping these days has been thanks to really good friends, lots of phone calls, and good times with my roommates here in New York. But how I got involved in peace building is has been an interesting journey. I'm from the US originally, but I grew up in North Macedonia. And I think for me, being the only American and my Macedonian public school growing up, and then for a few years, the only Macedonian in my American school, I think from an early age gave me just an awareness of my own identity and thinking more about belonging and what it means to belong in a place and what it means to be an insider or an outsider. And so taking that with me, I moved to the US for college and started doing work between Muslim and Christian communities in the United States, helping especially among Christian communities to build a deeper understanding and awareness of how to be hospitable to people of other faiths, especially as the majority in this country. And that work led me to New York City, where I continued doing local peace building work between faith communities, and then also became involved in international peace building organizations, where my roles and organizations often focused on helping larger organizations like the United Nations to have a deeper understanding of how to work with religious communities. And and from there, I started focusing more on reconciliation processes, and that's what led me to the Mary Hoke Center for Reconciliation. That's the short story, but I'll hand it over to Manal to share.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Christian, for the question. Yes, my name is Manal. I am from Lebanon, born and raised there most of my life. I moved to the US 2 years ago to pursue graduate school, and I just graduated, so I'm unemployed. But my journey into peacemaking was really actually sparked when I was working in the area of income generating, the field of income generating activities, so helping people start their own businesses. And at the time in Lebanon, the Syrian war had started, and so there were many refugees flooding into Lebanon. And the program I was involved in asked us to both serve the Syrians and the Lebanese, thinking if we serve both communities, no one would be upset. But that overlooked the history of grievances between the Lebanese and the Syrians. And so what we saw there was actually our very good intent was didn't translate on the ground. And in fact, there was a threat of ethnic cleansing. The Lebanese municipality where I was working left these flyers in front of the center I was managing saying, if the Syrians don't leave within 48 hours, we will come and kill the men, rape the women, and take the children as hostages. And I just realized, wow, I want to do really good work, but if we don't first work on the healing of the relationships, if we don't build our programs in now the terms that I know, conflict-sensitive programming, it's no good. And so this is where my journey started. And yeah, that led me into reconciliation, mediation, peace building on the local level, mostly in Lebanon, but also I did some work around the Middle East and North Africa.
Fantastic. Both of you actually have fantastic life stories. On the one hand, Manal, you working and coming from Lebanon and having this backdrop as well of conflicted context, which also inspired you. And also your story, Annalisa, which also talking about your coming to the US from Macedonia and you being involved in deep reconciliation work and bringing people from different faiths together to talk about peace is really fascinating. And I'm really sure that our audience is going to be also joining in and asking questions about the work that you do. But without further ado, I'm very excited actually to ask you a little bit more. You both come from different places. And my question to you then is, Annalisa and Manal, how did you guys meet? How did you guys actually meet and start working together? Maybe start with Manal, if you don't mind. Be the first.
All right. My turn. It was funny. I will confess that we had 0 spaces in common. And in fact, it was a friend who saw in me and Annalisa, in both of us, I think, a spirit that was very common. And so he knew both of us and he said, you guys need to meet. And we were on opposite sides of the oceans. And so we basically met through Skype. I remember that day where I sat down and I was talking to this woman, and I just thought it was going to be, a half-hour awkward conversation with this woman I don't know, and it would be over. But because my friend referred me to her, I'm not going to say no. But then it was just so much resonated between her and I. I almost felt like a 5-year-old. She would share something, and I would say, "Yeah, me too." I just felt like I was, wanting to be like her. But really, we had so much in common that it really resonated for me. Annalisa, what's your take on it?
So I think it's interesting actually in the moment that we're in to reflect on the fact that we met virtually. But I remember after that call, just closing my laptop and saying to myself and to the friend that I saw immediately after that, I think I just found my Lebanese sister. And just feeling like, even though we had never met in person, there was this deep resonance with things that we were passionate about in the world, but also somehow in one conversation we were able to realize that some of the more personal challenges and questions that we had about the world were resonating with each other. And so that was the start of our introduction. And then we were actually able to spend some time in each other's cities, which was really cool. Manal came to visit me in New York and that was connected to a work trip that she had. And then I got to spend the summer with her in Lebanon. And then since she's moved to the US for her master's program, we've gotten to spend a lot more time together. And through that have been able to get started on some of the work that we're doing together now.
Fantastic. And one thing that for me is actually very powerful is this notion that, it doesn't really matter where you come from. When you have something that brings you together, that a passion that you share together, a commitment to service, the desire to connect with other people from different parts of the world, I think that's really something that will always bring people together. And I think even in this time when the world is so divided, we've been watching what is happening in the US with the recent killing of George Floyd. And I feel like the world has completely joined in solidarity, really, in terms of addressing police violence and police brutality. And I feel like to a large extent, you both reflect this notion that it really doesn't matter where you come from. When there is a shared passion, when there is a shared cause for justice that needs to be addressed, then that's what actually brings us together. And I want to maybe segue now into the work that you've both have been doing. First, talking to us about your work with Unconventional. you recently launched a network for young women peace builders that is called Unconventional. I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that, and if you want to highlight a little bit more how it was started and what you really are aspiring to do with this network.
Thank you. I'll tell a few stories that kind of help draw you into what led us to starting Unconventional. So a few years ago, my colleague Amy and I ran a women's retreat that was for peace builders, and it was for community leaders and people who were really passionate about bringing change to their community, all women. And the retreat that we ran was really focusing on well-being and resilience. And so in our conversations that we had with these women and our peers, we realized that there was so often that space was missing for really talking about what the stress and the challenges that we face are, and how we're affected by them personally in work that we feel so passionately about. It's core to who we are, and it's core to the change that we want to see in the world, and that's exhausting. And that brings its own set of challenges and stresses that sometimes we're not always able to relate to other peers with, but being in a space with other people who maybe have oriented their careers, or not even their careers, but just the way that they are engaging with the world, having spaces to acknowledge some of that deeper pain was really powerful. And so I drew from that time just an awareness that actually naming some of the stress, naming some of the challenges, actually can play a profound role in normalizing that we all struggle in this space, and that we all have our own pain. In some ways, that has motivated us to be where we are now. I think without the pain of our life stories, we wouldn't have seen the needs in certain communities and the needs within the places that we are, to really lean into some of that pain. And so I found that in following conversations with a number of different young women, whether it was in the back of a conference room, or going around a walk during a break during work, or over the weekend having breakfast around the table with different friends, I found that these challenges and these stories started to resonate. I started to hear themes of the isolation that people felt in this work, maybe not always being understood by their families or their peers. I heard frequently, we're on the brink of burnout, or we are burning out, and just starting to feel exhausted. And personally, I had times where I burnt out, and where I had put myself completely into the work that I was doing, and I crashed, and my body said, "You're done. You can take a few weeks to lie in bed now, because your body is tired." And so actually some of those were also wake-up calls for me of really wanting to lean into spaces where I could be with friends, or be with people who would encourage me to take care of myself as I continue developing in my career, which I have oriented towards peace building. And then the next story that I wanted to share was actually just last fall. So I had a number of these conversations with different women, and especially with my colleague Amy, who we had run the retreat together. And in October, it was time for me to move. So I was planning to move from New York to DC. And all of a sudden I realized I'm not going to have my community with me when I go. I've built this strong network of friendships in New York. And what is that going to look like? What is that going to feel like when I move? And so that was actually a moment, I think, where we put our foot on the gas pedal and said, okay, we should actually start this, because if we're asking ourselves, where's that community and what does that community look like, maybe we're not alone in that, and maybe actually starting to open these spaces for other people may add value. And so so Amy and I started asking a lot of different women within our networks, would this be something that you're interested in? And is this something that's resonating with you, to start a community, to start a network for young women, to gather together in friendship, to gather together in support of one another's leadership. And I'm actually going to hand it over to Manal, because I want her to share her part of the story in this too.
Yeah, thank you. There are many stories. I think there's one story that I would like to highlight that relates to this quite well. Annalisa was talking about the isolation and the loneliness. And these are not always inflicted on us. These are sometimes things that we do upon ourselves. One of the things that has been true for me in my life is that coming to the US, I had lived through many wars in Lebanon, and that is the norm. Everyone in Lebanon has gone through these wars. I'm nothing special. In fact, it almost feels weird to say, you know, let's debrief this because this is everyday life. But coming here, I went to a baseball game right after my first week in the US, and they had fireworks at the end. And I had always enjoyed fireworks, but that day the fireworks took me right back to the experience of war. I just heard it in my ears. I, got all teary-eyed and shivery, and I just couldn't function for maybe 20 minutes. And I realized, I think this is a form of PTSD, and I probably need to go see a therapist. And I did. But what I was surprised to see was that unpacking my trauma from my childhood and my adolescent years helped me see that, of course, not only did it propel me into the work that I was doing, I was passionate about the work I'm doing because of my own experience in living through wars. But also these experiences of living through wars made me want to look for ways for me to cope. And the ways that I developed were unhealthy. So I developed unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with all of the stress, and also the stress that comes with working on the front lines as a peace builder. And that meant that I was ashamed of what I was doing. And so I would feel guilt, and I didn't want to share with anyone who I really was. And I would, hide these parts of my identity. And that didn't help me get over my unhealthy habits. In fact, it reinforced them. And so I found myself being isolated and lonely and on the brink of burnout, but because I hadn't really dealt with the things that needed to be dealt with in order to not only be propelled in the work, but be doing the work from a place of healing. And so, what Annalisa and I are talking about is we want these spaces to be common. We want us to share honestly with each other who we really are, and we want to help each other find ways to find help. We could be the container for that. Maybe we have answers, and maybe we don't, but maybe we can just share, yeah, me too. And this is what helped me. And here's maybe a resource or something of the sort. So back over to you, Annalisa. Yeah.
Maybe before Annalisa actually comes back, I just wanted to say a few things that to me are really very powerful from hearing both of your stories and how you guys got connected. Manal, you've just shared that, your experience with fireworks in the US triggered some emotions and triggered some trauma in you that had been silenced there. Myself, coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo, also a country that was torn by war, I remember the time I was doing my master's in the US, I had a similar experience. I saw people really excited whenever they had fireworks.
Wow.
It was really traumatizing because it reminded me the days of us running away from war, and it was just really hard. And just like you, actually to do some counseling and therapy for me to actually start adjusting to this way of life. And I feel like this is maybe a very simple but very powerful example of how things that we take for granted, in one context or in one cultural context, may actually be a different thing. And one thing that you both are sharing indeed is this idea that we may come from different cultural backgrounds, but the idea of having a community that listens to you, that supports you, that understands that you are going through something that is special, that is particular to you, is something that we need, and particularly women. So I want to return back to Annalisa if she may want to share a little bit more unconventional, what it is, and how do you start bringing women across boundaries to share their work and also to support each other.
Thanks for sharing that, Christian. And yeah, so building on these stories, Unconventional is a growing community, a growing network now for young women who want to come together, young women who are advancing peace and reconciliation in the different places that they live and work. And so it was launched in January by friends, and it's forming now into an organization really that can provide these spaces and that can open the door, set the table for these conversations. we had our first launch event in DC, and then we had another one in New York. And since March, that table has been a virtual table. And we've actually found that that through the last, it's been 10 weeks now that we have done virtual gatherings once a week. We're able to connect young women from countries all around the world, all around different parts of the US, to come together and share their experiences of how they're coping with this time, how they're strengthening their own resilience, how they're leaning into some of the challenges and developing their leadership even in this time. And so Unconventional's vision really is to see a generation of women leaders who are flourishing in their work, who are leading from a place of abundance, and who are connected and supporting, connected to a network and able to really support one another to grow in this leadership. I think sometimes there's a perception that women in general or young women have to compete against one another. And it was interesting when our first gathering, we actually got all together and we had a moment where we all went around and we just said, I think that I'm like the least accomplished person or the least cool person like in this room. And everyone went around and said like, no, but I feel that way, but I feel that way. And so actually having spaces too where we normalize that insecurity is part of being human. And we would like to be a space that can really champion one another and where we can really support and encourage each other's successes, encourage each other's needs for rest as well. So moving into the summer, I'm excited to share too that Unconventional will be coordinating short-term small groups for women who want to get together. We'll be doing a 3-week pilot starting this summer, so 6 to 8 people per group that will get together for 3 weeks virtually. And so we'll be coordinating those and facilitating those as part of a larger peer support program, which I can also share about. But that's a little bit more about where Unconventional is right now. And Manal, I didn't know if you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, one more thing that I thought we haven't maybe underlined quite as much is that in these spaces and in our friendships, there's been a lot of course, time to talk about our careers and what we're going through, etc. But I think one thing that also meant a lot to me in these spaces of unconventional friendships, I want to say, is being able to be truly myself and being accepted as that. So not only, what I'm going through in terms of trauma, but also, how I'm doing with my boyfriend or this last relationship that I broke up in, and, how am I doing on a personal level as well as on a professional level, and just being able to be all of myself in that space without feeling like, this space is only for professional development. And I can't share my vulnerabilities or my stress on the different other levels. So this is something that's been important to me as well.
Very important indeed. In fact, I think that's really something that often left out in the conversation around peace building. We tend to keep this professional outlook and we forget ourselves. We're still connected. We're still in relationships. We still have personal issues that sometimes we just don't know who can maybe help us go or navigate through them. As we continue this conversation, I'd like also to say thanks to our online viewers who are joining in. Mohammed, thank you for joining from Nepal. Philip Jackson, thank you for joining from Macedonia. We have Prince Musa joining from Nigeria. And we also have Liliana Pimentel from Brazil, Abdul Rahman from Kenya. We have Kaltumi Abdulaziz from Nigeria, an amazing peace builder as well, who says that trust is a serious issue in Nigeria. I've oftentimes tried to confide on people whom I feel could mentor me, but they rather see me as a competition. I don't know why this is particularly among women here in my country. This brings us back again to the point that Annalisa, you raised earlier, that sometimes women sitting together is often perceived as you have to compete against each other. But I want to hear maybe a little bit more, and answering to Kaltumi's point there, what do you do to ensure that there is actually positive interactions that are not or stepping on one another? What do you do to make sure that women who join Unconventional feel indeed supported rather than competing against each other?
I think I would say you can't ensure this, but you can model it, and you can set an example by being the first one to share your own story and to express your own willingness to be vulnerable. And so I think within the leadership of Unconventional, we've committed to building that space and to being able to model that and to lean into those harder conversations and to inviting other people into that. So I think people know when they're coming into an unconventional gathering, this isn't just a professional networking space, that it is a space where we're looking to really grow and to encourage each other and to sharpen one another in our own journeys.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Maybe just taking that from there, I think many of our online viewers as well are interested in hearing a little bit more about the peer support group. And I want to maybe segue a little bit more into that, because this is really what connects us to the current pandemic. And what you are bringing forward is a support system that will help local peace builders to navigate this time. So I would like maybe to ask Manal if you want us to bring us into the loop of what this task force is all about and how people can actually be part of it, maybe to just start us into that conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you. I must confess, I'm not as familiar as Annalisa is. She's the co-chair of the task force, and I'm just working on the peer groups. So if it's okay, I will talk a little bit more specifically on the peer groups. If Annalisa, you can introduce the larger picture, if that's okay.
Happy to do that. So I can give just a brief introduction to what the task force is. The center where I work, the Mary Hoke Center for Reconciliation, has launched a task force that aims to help streamline support for peace builders during COVID-19. And when we talk about support, we're thinking about psychosocial support right now for individuals as well as for organizations. So we're looking at different ways that we can help peace building organizations and networks strengthen their own capacity to support their staff that are in conflict areas or their partners in conflict areas. And we're also now launching a peer support program that will be open to individuals who may or may not be affiliated with specific organizations, but who are just working in their local context and working for peace. But the task force has brought together leading peace builders, local peace builders from different areas, as well as psychologists, organizational psychologists, so people who really have a holistic picture about the human needs and their social needs. So the task force a few weeks ago held a learning exchange that brought together 35 organizations from all over the world. So leaders from those organizations came together to talk about the key challenges that their own staff or partners were experiencing. And what was interesting that we found in some of the responses to, and we had sent out a survey, was that people from these organizations, we asked them, where are the challenges right now in providing this kind of support to your staff or to your partners? And the least cited reason was that there aren't enough resources. So people said, there's resources out there on how we do this. There's things you can read, there's things that you can inform yourself with, but our own capacity to deliver these services right now is tapped. So the capacity to plan and deliver is something that's really under stress right now because of all of the other challenges that we're facing. So the task force envisions these peer support groups as a space that people can come in and can have this space of support. And that's something that we're organizing. Manal has been a leading person in that effort and designing and setting up the peer groups, which will be for men and women of all ages from all backgrounds. And I'll hand it over to you, Manal, to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. So as Annalisa shared, and as you can probably imagine, peer support groups are small groups of 4 to 6 people, possibly at a time, that meet regularly on a weekly basis, maybe once a week for about an hour, and who just check in with each other and share with each other, the highs, the lows, and how are they coping. I think all of us have many many ways and resources within us. And sometimes especially as peace builders, we know these things. And so just coming together to normalize, yes, we are going through difficulties, and how can we lean on each other during these times? And so the peer support groups kind of just are places that are facilitated from one of us, any one of us. If you would like to, if you're here listening and you'd like to be one of the facilitators, you're welcome to do so. Or if you'd like to just join as a member, you're also welcome to do so. And so we're kind of running a pilot phase to see, what works, what doesn't work, and how long do people want to be committed to this. And so we're doing 3 weeks initially, and then a little phase of evaluation to see, how can we improve, and then go on hopefully from there for a longer period of time.
And I want to just add quickly to that, in why we think this is important right now for peace builders and people who are working still in the communities. We know if in our experience and from what we're hearing from a lot of people, we've realized that the isolation or the stress, the challenges are such key parts of our day-to-day experience. Those didn't go away during COVID-19. Those only got worse. And they're not new. They're not new challenges, but they have certainly been made much more difficult because of the increased stress of the pandemic that we're facing. And that's a stress that people are experiencing quite differently from place to place and from person to person. And at least the Mary Hoke Center for Reconciliation really believes that for reconciliation and peace building to happen, personal transformation is so essential. And the peace builders who are integral in leading that work, their own transformation, their own healing is an essential part of that process. So through these peer support groups, we're hoping to bring spaces where we can sit with one another, we can normalize some of those challenges, and where we can strengthen just the way that we show up for ourselves and for our communities.
Fantastic. And I'm really glad that this is already something that you've already started, and I can imagine that there is a way to join them. Maybe, I don't know if you can share a little bit more, how can people who are joining us online can be part of these peer support groups, because indeed it's very important. For so many of us who are sitting at home, we just really lack that space where we feel completely supported in our own challenges, especially during the pandemic. So maybe if you could share a little bit more, how can people be part of that?
Yes, so the pilot peer support program will start on June 29th. And so we're asking for those who want to participate in this first pilot, which is free and it's open to anyone who wants to join. We have a registration form that's on our website, so you can go and you can fill it out, and you can actually indicate which kind of group you'd like to be in. And there will be the option if for women, if they want to be in a women's only group, and that those groups will be organized by Unconventional. So that option is there. So there's 2 ways that you can access that link. There's one link on the MHCR website, which I can share, and then there's another link on the Unconventional website. And so both of those will take you to the same registration form, but you can mark which kind of group you'd like to be involved in. And so those the groups will start end of June, and they'll go through the third week of July.
Mm-hmm. And there's also an option, if I may add. Sorry, I interrupted you. There's also an option. I have a good friend who was telling me that she's just starting an NGO herself, and so we also have the option of, if you'd like to have a peer support simply for your people within your own organization, you can also set this up with, and it's indicated as well in the form.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you very much. I actually just added to this conversation the links to those websites that you just mentioned. So hopefully our viewers as well can join in and ask questions and can be part of this very great resource that we all need, especially in this time of lockdown. Now, there are some questions. Thank you so much, Lota, for joining in as well. Thank you, Dishani from Sri Lanka, who has also participated in our live call last week. So let's hear her question. This is what she says: can you share with us some daily practices that we can infuse into our lives that would help us bring inner peace. So this is something that I feel like is a recurring question that people really want to know. What can I do as I sit at home? Maybe I'm not able to access the internet. Some people don't have necessarily access to internet because they're working in conditions that do not allow them to maybe be part of a support group. What can they do in the meantime to take care of themselves, if you have any tips or advice that can help?
Do you want to go on? I have some thoughts.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, yeah, thank you for mentioning it is tough. And it's tough because of many things, the lockdown, but also I think what's going on right now in terms of just this awakening and it's a very difficult time, especially seeing so much injustice happening around the world and being confined to your home. How do you respond? For me, I've honestly felt like I need to do a lot of digging into myself before I try to find solutions. And one way that for me has been important for me to have inner peace, and I am a Christian, so for me it's been taking the time to read my Bible in the morning, but asking God, and that's my own practice, and you might do something different, to highlight one verse that He wants to speak to me about. And then in the evening, I come back and I just write the verse in Arabic calligraphy because this is my my native language, and I draw whatever comes to mind when I read when this verse is written. And so I think it's just ways to use your hands and be creative. And this is very specific to me, but I think if you have a spiritual practice, I think grounding yourself in that spiritual practice for me has been really helpful. And another thing is friends. Talk to friends. It's a very challenging to talk via social media or in screen, and so I don't want to dismiss how difficult that is. But if you don't have anyone around you physically, if you don't have a roommate or if you're not living with your family, I do still think it's helpful when connecting with someone who can really understand you.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you shared, Manal, about finding things to do with your hands. And I have found during this time, I have really reconnected with my love of art. And so drawing and coloring and just using my hands to express, whether it's different shapes and colors or pictures, has been really helpful. I've also been just realizing that each week during this pandemic, my body has needed different things. And so I'm really trying to listen to what my body is telling me that it needs. And usually it's exercise, but sometimes it's rest. And so for me, doing some kind of exercise in the morning has just, I've realized it changes my whole day. And so even when I don't feel like it, trying to motivate myself or asking other friends to be accountable with me to take that time to move my body in the morning, and also to be practicing more mindful breathing and time to really center myself and take time to be calm and to be still. And one question actually that's really helped me in this whole pandemic has been asking myself, is this in my control? Can I actually control this? And what about this can I control? And usually it's just my own reactions. And so that question has been one that I've been coming back to a lot. And that's been helpful for me. But certainly I think there are a number of ways that we're all navigating and trying to find. And I think as people, we are very creative to figure out ways to take care of ourselves. So it's been actually encouraging to me to hear so many different people and friends during this time that are finding ways to take care of themselves in ways that they haven't had to really try before. But I think we have a lot of tools in our tool belt to bring that inner peace, and we're getting to learn a lot more how to use them right now.
Mm-hmm. And it's really fascinating actually to think about inner peace, because usually we don't, as peace builders, take enough time to consider that It's peace within that is also important. The same way peace without, like peace in the world, is important. We also need to nurture that. And I've struggled with it myself. Like at times I find myself really immersed in what I need to do for peace in the world and what I need to do to make sure that young peace builders are having their space and they can be heard. But I also get trapped because inside of me, I don't necessarily find time to do that. And one thing for me that has also helped me during my master's program, I was introduced to journaling, which is really a process of just writing your feelings and allowing your pen to actually just be a tool or a voice to expressing what you're going through. And I feel like that's something that has helped me and has been an anchor for me in times when I feel completely conflicted or I didn't know what to do. I just sit down and write everything that comes to mind. So just also want to share that. We are really moving into a very great conversation. Thank you everyone for joining. The phones from Burundi for joining. Kaltumi, again, thank you so much for sharing these resources. Many people are really interested, and I'm sure they will join in and maybe be part of the task force and the peer support group that you're putting together. Maybe in our last 4 minutes before we end the call, I'd like us to go back to the conversation we started with earlier, how you both got connected, how you came into this peace building work, how you started Unconventional. If you have a message to women out there who are still feeling maybe lonely and feeling misunderstood or feeling not supported, and especially those who have just recently graduated or who have finished school and they're trying to navigate what it means to jump into the professional world in a time of chaos and crisis like this, because so many are in this situation where they just don't know what is going to happen to them. So I don't know if there is any advice or any wisdom that you'd like to share with anyone who might be in those shoes right now.
I feel like I'm not wise enough to give any advice because I'm in it right now. But I would say, for me, it has been difficult to go through an interview after the other, and kind of almost feeling like I'm questioned. Are you really who you say you are? Are these things on your CV, just fancy words or not? And maybe not getting calls back or getting rejected even before they even interview you. It's very tough, and it puts you. It makes you question your own self. And again, I've come back to friends, letters, emails, things that people have written for me. Just going back to remind myself who I am, and saying, okay, maybe I'm not seen as valuable right now in these specific contexts, but I know my friends value me. I know my God values me, and just again recentering on, who are the important people in my life, and what do they say about me? I don't have much more advice than that.
I think I would add to that you're not alone, and that there are many who have journeyed before you and many who will journey after you. And my encouragement, just from my own experience, is to lean into sharing in those harder times, to lean into friendships, to reach out for friendships, because likely someone else is feeling the same thing. And there's such a beauty and a joy, I think, in realizing that some of the challenges that you experience are not unique to you. They do look different for each person, but we can journey together and learn a lot from each other. And that has always been such an encouragement to me when I see my peers and people who who are in a similar life stage or just a little bit ahead, and noticing the journey that they have gone through. And so my encouragement would be to look for those people and to ask them their stories and to share your own story, and not forget your own value. And that applies to men and women. I think we all need to be leaning into these conversations before and especially now as the world that we're living in just continues to bring one thing after the next.
Absolutely. And I agree with that indeed, because without a peer support system, without a space where we can actually share and connect with others, and on the same note of being part of a community that listens to you, I'd like just to leave here that Conducive Space for Peace has recently launched an online platform that actually allows for local peace builders who are dealing and responding to COVID-19 to share resources and information among themselves. And I think this is also another space that you can also be part of, and you can also join and be feel a sense of support and be part of the conversation of what is happening around the world in terms of responding to COVID-19. But also what Annalisa and Manal have shared, I think is very critical, that you don't feel that you are alone, and that you don't feel like you are left out, because indeed you're not alone. And it's indeed spaces like what Unconventional is trying to create, spaces like the peer support group that you're bringing forward, that will also help you to feel part of a community. So I'm really glad for the time we've had together today. Annalisa, thank you so much. And Manal, thank you so much for taking the time to share. I know this is just the beginning, but we'll have many more conversations to come. Wish you good luck as you start and continue leading these peer support groups. And please keep us in the loop, and let us continue sharing and engaging with this broader community of local peace builders during this time. And also thank you to all our online viewers. Thank you, Julien Bahati from Congo. And thank you everyone really who has stood with us and continue to support this conversation, these continued dialogues with local peace builders. We'll see you again in about 2 weeks. All right. Take care.
And thank you, Christian, for holding this space and for the work that you're doing and bringing so many people together. It's an encouragement to us as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.